Double Fright Feature, Halloween Edition. When I was 9 years old, I was severely traumatized on Halloween. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. Used to be. My therapist recently encouraged me to reach out to others and get out the things about the trauma I've been reliving since childhood. I figure this subreddit is as good a place as any, and besides, no one here will know who I am, or at least, I hope not. So, on the advice of my therapist, I'm gonna let you guys know what happened. I was 9 years old, it was Halloween, and of course, as always, me and my family had decorated the whole house from top to bottom. My family was really into it, mostly because of my dad. His love for Halloween apparently started early on from childhood. He always told me he had such good memories on Halloween, and as such, he couldn't wait each year to get into the spooky spirit. Every year my dad went all out, putting up lights, paper cutouts, and the piece de resistance, the entire front yard covered in spooky animatronics purchased from Spirit Halloween. Fake graveyard tombstones, skeletons, spiderwebs, orange and green fairy lights, jack-o'-lanterns, and a gratuitous amount of artificial fog. Thinking back on it now, the guy had to have spent over $700 a year on Halloween decor alone. Our house was decked out with various lights, candles, and fake pumpkins. The whole house screamed orange and black. At night, my dad would turn the lights down low and only let the side table lamps be on, which gave the entire house a very cozy, warm feeling that was also strangely eerie at times. Halloween night was of course no exception, and the house was dark except for the candles and jack-o'-lanterns glowing inside. My dad had turned off the side table lamps to make the house extra dark. We lived just north of Juneau, in Alaska, so this time of year would get dark very soon in the evening because of our latitude. It also meant everyone's Halloween costumes had to revolve around jackets and winter gear, so dressing slutty wasn't really an option unless you were super drunk. My father usually waited until around 5 o'clock to begin escorting us out to trick or treat. Our small town, although not absolutely filled with people, was similarly filled with the Halloween spirit, so we usually got quite a bit of candy each year. I looked out the window into the darkness of the evening, the sun having sunk below the horizon, its light barely leaking out yellow into the inky bluish black of the night sky. I could see the orange glow of the neighbors' jack-o'-lanterns flickering on the steps and porches of their houses. Most houses didn't even try to compare to my dad's house. At the time, my dad was divorced and had gotten total custody of me and my sister. My mom, as such, was mostly absent, except for weekend visits. "Dad," I groaned out while looking outside. "When are we heading out?" I was eager to begin trick-or-treating and stuffing my mouth full of sweets and chocolate. I could hear my sister in the other room laughing while the rustle of fabric mixed in with it. My dad was busy helping her get her witch costume ready. She had chosen to be a witch when she had seen Hocus Pocus for the first time, and had been a witch every Halloween since. She was only a year younger than me, and always seemed to need my dad's help with something. "Just a second, son," he called out. "I'll be out in a second, just wait for a bit, I'm readjusting your sister's hat." My dad, on the other hand, this year had decided to be a creepy clown, complete with a mask and fake bloody knife. "We're all dressed, hurry up," I grumbled, and I continued looking outside. I noticed the lights of the candles burning on the coffee table reflecting on the inside of the window. The house was dark except for their light, and if I was all alone, it would have been creepy in atmosphere. I looked around at the room. The walls were covered in pumpkin cutouts and bats. The coffee table had a bowl of candy corn and a few plastic skulls and spiders, as well as 3 pumpkin-scented candles, whose light blended in with the wood and the walls, making the whole room feel like I was in a horror movie. I tried not to let the chill creeping up my spine bother me, and I held my plastic pumpkin pail next to me. I had chosen to be a vampire that year, complete with cape, white face paint, and plastic teeth with red paint to function as fake blood. I sat waiting when I heard my sister's voice suddenly stop. At first, I had not noticed it, but suddenly the house was as silent as the grave. It made me feel really uneasy, but at the time, I figured my dad and sister were on their way into the living room. I looked out the window again at the lawn, the orange and purple fairy lights shining out into the darkness, bouncing off the pumpkins, gravestones, fake skeletons, and animatronics. My dad had turned on the fog machine about 30 minutes earlier, and it was busy pumping out a slow-moving, thick white fog that slowly slithered its way across the yard before fading like smoke into the street of the neighborhood. My dad's animatronics stood like demented soldiers, arching over in contorted positions. There were at least 10 of them, ranging from Jack Skellington to a giant Grim Reaper with glowing green eyes. There were all the famous big horror movie characters, like Jason, Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course, Michael Myers. They typically wouldn't move unless you tripped off the sensor, and then they'd let out a poorly recorded catchphrase, creak, and move, all while playing the respective movie's iconic music screeching in the background. I watched as 3 kids dressed up as a ghost, a werewolf, and Spider-Man came walking down the street. They walked in front of our yard and, predictably, right in front of an animatronic figure in black, holding a plastic knife. I watched as the animatronic lurched toward the kids and shouted, "I'll kill you." The kids screamed and ran, running to the other side of the street, running all the way out of sight. Those decorations were scary, all right. I looked back inside and yelled, "Dad, come on! Other kids are already outside, we need to go." The house was still silent, and I got up out of annoyance. How long could adjusting a hat take? Stomping out of the dimly lit room, I walked into the hallway leading to my sister's room. Suddenly, I heard the doorbell ring. I turned and scampered down the hall to the front door, grabbing a fistful of candy that was inside the small bowl Dad had on the floor near the door for such a purpose. I opened the door, and to my surprise, no one was there. The front lawn was silent, and the fog kept slowly drifting along. I walked out onto the small concrete porch and looked around for a second. No one was there. I walked forward and down the steps to the side of the house to see if anyone had run off. Again, no one was there. Maybe it had just been some teenagers ding-dong ditching. I shrugged my shoulders and started heading back to the front door. I got to the door and then froze. My eyes glazed over the lawn. Something had caught my eye. The yard. It was off. I looked at it for a second. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I stared at it for a little while before heading back inside. Inside, the house was no longer silent. I heard footsteps walking down into the living room. I smiled and walked up to the hallway where my dad strode in with his clown mask on. "Dad, are we finally ready to go?" I asked, looking up at him. He stood there silently and nodded his head. "Great. Hey, where's Audrey?" Audrey was the name of my sister. She was mysteriously absent. My dad pointed behind him. "Okay," I said. "Well, let's get her and go." Now, I know what you're thinking. You must be an idiot to not be suspicious of that situation, but you don't get it. You just don't expect these sorts of things. Halloween is supposed to be fake scary, not real scary. That's what makes it fun. That's what used to make it fun. I walked past my dad casually and into my sister's room. That's when Halloween changed me forever. I opened the door and the room was empty, or it had appeared to be so. It was pitch black and only the dim light of the living room streamed in. I could hardly make out an object in the place. I tried the light switch on the door but couldn't find the switch. I only felt what I could only assume was a leather jacket that had been hung there on the wall. It was rough but soft. No light switch. I glazed my eyes around the dark room. On the floor, I noticed there was a poster board with black markings on the surface. I couldn't read what was on it. I looked around the room but couldn't see anything. The room was so empty, so I turned around and walked to the living room. I held the poster board in my hands, trying to make out the words as the light from the candles got closer and closer. Surely but slowly, the words became legible. When I finally read what was on the poster, my heart leapt into my throat. "Be silent or I'll fucking kill her." I looked up from the page, trembling. The living room was empty. I slowly turned my head to look around the room, the candle lights flickering every few seconds, making the room a tad bit darker before lighting it up just a little bit more. I whimpered and looked back at the hallway where I'd just come in from. The house was silent. I waited for what felt like an eternity. My heart was beating so fast, it was all I could hear in that quiet, quiet house. I slowly and shakily began to walk towards the front of the house. What was going on? Why had Dad left a note like that? I crept slowly towards the window, which was completely open except for the curtains lazily parted on its sides. I noticed the yard again. I glazed out from afar and got the same uneasy feeling as before. Suddenly it became obvious what was wrong with it. The animatronics weren't in the right place. They were off. I turned back and choked out, "Daddy, where are you?" I heard a shot ring out from the hallway and I jumped violently. I cried out and then walked quickly into the hallway to see what had happened. Curiosity killed the cat, as they say. The hallway was empty, but the door to my sister's room was still ajar, the blackness of the room like a gaping maw. I walked into the room and I saw some shape in the darkness. I was too frightened to find out what it was. I rushed back into the living room and yanked at the front door. It wouldn't budge. I looked through the peephole and saw my dad outside grasping the handle and leaning back to keep it from opening. I yanked and yanked at the door to no avail. "Let me out, Daddy," I cried out, tears streaming down my face. I, out of nowhere, heard a knock on the window. One of the so-called animatronics was at the window, staring in with its face up against the glass. It was Michael Myers. I screamed and ran, grabbing a candle, rushing back into the hallway, right into my sister's room. I slammed the door behind me and the candle nearly went out. I locked the door and then turned around. What I saw made my breathing completely stop. My sister was on the ground, sprawled out like a doll, her eyes open and a horrific blast wound covering what used to be the left half of her skull. Brain matter, bone, and fresh blood covered the carpet. Her witch hat was on the floor beside her, and her pumpkin pail was tossed to the side of the room. I suddenly found my voice and breath again and began to cry uncontrollably, my heaving chest letting out pathetic moans of shock and agony. I watched in utter horror as the closet doors of my sister's room opened, and two men got out, one holding the gun that killed her. One was wearing a Grim Reaper mask, and the other was wearing one of those cheap gorilla masks you find at Walmart. "Say one more word and you die," the gorilla man said. He got up close to me and put the gun to my chest. "Turn around, unlock the door, and go into the living room." I did as he demanded, clutching the burning candle. It was one of those candles with 3 wicks, and the melted wax sloshed the sides of the glass container, now hot to the touch. I walked down the hallway, my mind racing. Waiting for me, standing ominously in the room, were my dad and the person wearing the Michael Myers mask. "Go to your parents," the gorilla man said. I walked, my sobs squeezing out the words, "Why?" I stopped in front of him and looked up at his scary red-nosed clown mask. "Why would you do this, Dad?" I wept out, my breath shaky and my chest jerking 3 or 4 times with each inhale. My dad stared at me from beneath his clown mask, the hood of his jacket covering any visible part of his face not covered by the mask. He didn't utter a word. "Why?" I belted out, throwing the candle right at him. The candle fell to the floor and spilled hot wax all over my father, who jumped out of the way. The rug it landed on suddenly caught fire, and the 2 men behind me and the Michael Myers guy backed away from the flames. I backed away too, and the gorilla man lifted his gun at me. "Now you've done it, you little piece of shit," he yelled, and I ducked down to the floor behind the now spreading flames. I heard 3 or 4 shots ring out towards me and heard the bullets whiz by. How they missed me, I'll never know. The flames grew in size rapidly, and the room filled with smoke almost instantly. I heard coughing, and the gorilla man covered his gorilla face with his hand and stopped shooting the gun. I crawled along the floor, staying low. The 4 men began coughing and reaching for their faces, while I crawled towards the front door. The room rapidly began to haze over as the smoke from the fire started blocking the remaining candlelight, as well as the light of the now large fire. I got up, my face and nose burning from the harsh smoke, and I opened the front door. Cold, fresh air whooshed into the living room, and I heard a voice yell, "You idiots, he's getting away!" Getting past the remaining haze of the front door, I rushed out onto the porch and heard gunshots being fired behind me in my direction. I rushed down the stairs and looked back at the living one last time. The glow of the flames, I saw the face of my father's mask, desperately grasping at the straps that held it to his face. The person I had thought was my dad ripped off their face mask to reveal a face I had never expected in my wildest nightmares. My mother. Her red hair falling out of the hood of the coat, coughing and wheezing as she tried to gain some understanding of her surroundings. The gorilla man was not far from her. He dropped his gun and began to take off his mask too. I turned back, screamed, and began running as fast as I could. I heard the fire alarms in the house begin going off at full volume as I ran off into the street and down the block. I heard some voices shouting and the distinct sound of my back door opening and slamming shut. I ran faster and screamed until my voice was raw and my lungs could take no more. I don't remember what happened after that. I only know what my neighbors 3 blocks down from my house told me. Apparently, I had come screaming down the block, had beat on their door, and then fainted right there on the porch. They had opened the door, and seeing me and my house on fire, they had called the police. The police had come, and so had the fire department. Apparently, that fire was the first 4-alarm fire that the town had experienced in nearly 25 years. The whole neighborhood had come to see the house burst into flames. It apparently took nearly 3 hours to put it out, but it had been such an intense fire, it had all but burned the place to the ground. They also had, as my neighbors told me, made the grisly discovery of the charred remains of my sister and father, both in my sister's room. I don't know how I missed him. According to the police, he had been in the room with her, next to the door, trying to block the flames from entering the room. What absolute bull. The last thing I remember, I was pulled into an interrogation room with 2 cops, and they asked me a bunch of questions about what had happened. I told them all about the strange men and my mother and my sister being dead, but they wouldn't listen. They kept telling me it was an electrical fire caused by all the electronics my father had set up in the yard. I kept trying to tell them what I saw, but they refused to listen to me. Eventually, the state troopers stepped into the room, and I was taken away by a social worker. They would eventually go on to make me a ward of the state. I was moved to Washington State and put into an orphanage. The events of that day have haunted me for more than 19 years. I still have nightmares. Why did my mom do such a thing? I can only reason the divorce and losing custody of us had driven her to do this. If she couldn't have us, no one could. But how did she get those men to help her? I am bothered by the fact that one of the officers in the interrogation room was mysteriously missing his gun. Thank God the state troopers came in when they did. But maybe I'm wrong. There are so many unanswered questions. As for Halloween, I don't have anything to do with it anymore. The fear of dying was real for me that day. I don't care how much fun you think you're having. These things happen when you least expect them. Always double check the things around you, especially on Halloween. It's a time when you least expect it. What disturbs me the most are the little realizations I've had as I've gotten older. As I've gotten older, I've realized something about my sister's room that night when I entered it. Something that shakes me to my very core. That wasn't a jacket on the wall next to the door. Double Fright Feature, Halloween Edition, Story 2. I sold myself on the deep web. I'm what you call a crypto addict. Before that, though, I was someone who enjoyed browsing the deep web. I wasn't really looking for anything in particular, just curious as to whether or not the stories I had heard were true. I never really found anything that creepy though, but it was my first encounter with Bitcoin. A few sites used it, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of cryptocurrency. As such though, I had thought it was a scam or something shady at that point. This was back in the years 2012 to 2014, so as you can imagine, I'm really kicking myself for thinking that and not buying a few coins. My interest in the deep web waned over time, but around the year 2017, I began reading about cryptocurrency and that oh-so-shady thing Bitcoin on mainstream news outlets. That's when I made a deeper dive into the world of crypto. My goal at the beginning was just to earn enough money to pay off my student loans. Of course, nothing was ever that easy. I had made nearly every single mistake you could make while buying crypto. Once, I lost my seed phrase. I've sent crypto to the wrong wallet by mistake. I've FOMO'd and sold at a loss countless times. Twice I've been fooled by pump and dump schemes. Despite all of this, my net monetary change from buying into crypto has still been positive overall. That's mainly because I wisened up over the years and made back the money I had lost, and then some. Of course, every time I hear about a random coin going up 20 times in price, I do wish I would have seen the opportunity. But I know most of those coins probably don't have much value or long-term prospects. I invest in safe projects, but of course, like anyone else, I've been on the lookout for the next big thing. You know, the next big project that's going to the moon, so to speak. I got an email from an old acquaintance of mine. Let's call him Frank. Frank and I went back to the days when I scoured the deep web, and the two of us would often exchange information regarding anything interested that we'd found. I hadn't gotten a message from him in 2 years though, so I was kind of surprised. Hey, I know it's been a while, but I saw this weird thing and I think you'd want to check it out. I see from your profile that you've been in the crypto space for a while, right? What do you think about this? It's a site claiming to have made a new kind of coin. There was a link to a website. At first I was really confused. This website was on the deep web, but according to this mail was regarding a new crypto coin? That made no sense. When you made a new coin, one of the first things you wanted to do was get as many people in on the project as possible. Making all the information about your new coin exclusive to the deep web was a guarantee that it would probably never take off. Then again, maybe they were making some sort of super secure coin which the government couldn't trace, so they kept it on the down low. Regardless, I decided to check out the link. The website was honestly nothing to write home about. It was decently organized, but was rather plain. It looked like a web page from 2007. This was definitely the wrong thing to do if you wanted people to be interested in what you were doing, or convincing them that you had a new great idea for something. There wasn't even too much information on the site about the coin itself, with most of it linking to a video they had made. There was a forum, but accessible only to members. Guessing there was nowhere else to go, I went ahead and clicked the video. It showed a dark room with a desk right in the middle. Someone walked in wearing a white mask and a dark hoodie. As he spoke, his voice was distorted, so he was clearly using a filter of some sort. "Greetings. Thank you for your interest in our new project, one by which we hope to revolutionize the very concept of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. I have long since been a member of the crypto space, but I consider myself to be an environmentalist first. You must have already heard about the environmental impact that mining cryptocurrency has. Many people have spoken about that. As such, we wanted to look for a way to solve this problem. A solution quickly came to me, but it was a bit of an unorthodox one. You see, I am a man of many interests, and the occult was one of them. One thing I'd always been told was that spirits, demons, what have you, they always know everything going on in the world. They don't follow the normal laws of physics either." It was at this point that I began frowning. What on earth was this? Was this guy really talking about ghosts and spirits in a crypto video? I thought that it might be possible to use this to our advantage. You see, a spirit can theoretically solve a problem in an instant. Time works different for them, and the best part is the environmental impact is nil. I was just about ready to turn this off at this point. What kept me going was a mild curiosity regarding where this guy was going. This had to be some sort of scam, right? But what was the scam? Was he going to ask for a donation first? Or was he just trying to install malware on my computer? I mean, he must have made this video for a reason, right? I just wanted to know what the scam was so I could tell Frank what it was. I searched around in many books on the occult until I came upon them. They do have a name, but not one that you can speak freely in this tongue. Suffice it to say that certain supernatural creatures are willing to help us and mine our coin for us. Now, of course, you must be thinking that such a thing isn't worth your soul. Rest assured, though, that these creatures don't want our souls, simply our bodies. I told them that, in that case, they should buy us all a round of drinks first. He chuckled at his own joke. Anyway, the idea is simple. You, as a human, can rent out your body for a small portion of the day. In exchange, these creatures will mine coins for you. That's right. I managed to connect the spirit realm with the internet so that they can mine cryptocurrency for us. Right now, we are starting out with mining Bitcoin by this method to test it out, but we'll release our own project very soon. I can say, though, that I am quite excited by the potential of our upcoming coin, as it will be mined only by these entities. All information would be held not only on the internet, but within the spirit realm as well. So even if every database on Earth was wiped clean, we could recover the data. For now, though, we are just seeing how easy it is to mine Bitcoin using this method. If you're interested in renting out yourself, you can go ahead and sign the contract given on our site. If you're interested in simply buying some of our own coins when our new project will be released by conventional methods, please stay tuned for further updates. Thank you. The video ended at that and I was left confused. Making this all would have taken some cash and some time. So was it all just really a hoax? How were they planning on making money out of this? With no further information available, I checked out their forums, but that was only open to people who had signed their contract for now. I took a look at this contract. It was needlessly long and annoyed me because I knew there was no way that a site like this could ever take anyone to court if the contract was violated. So what was the point? The gist of the whole thing was that you would agree to rent out your body for a time ranging from 1 to 10 hours a day. In exchange, you would get a set amount of Bitcoin per day, with it increasing depending on how long you rented yourself out. Let's say you got X amount for an hour. Then you'd get 20 times X for 10 hours. Clearly, it was designed for people to choose the maximum amount of time possible. Frustrated, I put down my selection as 1 hour and hit accept. A message popped up. This contract will be valid for 1 year and cannot be canceled before then. Are you sure you want to accept? I scoffed at the idea of them trying to enforce this contract and hit the accept button. A congratulatory message popped up as well as an address to a wallet I could unlock. Disappointed, I browsed the site a bit more and saw nothing to explain what it really was. I could only chalk this all up to a very elaborate hoax. The next day I went about my day as usual when something odd happened as I left my driveway. I found myself in my office an instant later. If I had been paying a bit more attention at the time, I would have noticed that I had lost exactly 1 hour. But I wasn't. I'd zoned out while driving to work occasionally, but not when I was entering the building. I chalked it up to me just having a long daydream, though. Things didn't worry me. Not yet, at least. Something similar happened the next day, though I had some trouble noticing this as it happened when I was chilling around at home and just thought I'd lost track of time as the sky suddenly became a lot darker. The third day, though, it happened at work. I was in a meeting and then it was over and I was at my desk. On one hand, I was happy to be able to skip that meeting, but also I knew I was losing my mind. The MRIs all came back normal and the doctors thought I had dissociative identity disorder when a month later I found myself in my house with some jewelry I had no recollection of getting. I learned the next day that one of my neighbors had been mugged, but didn't know who it was. That day, I suddenly found myself in a park with a shard of glass on my shoulder. I learned that someone had smashed another neighbor's car. Fed up with this, I installed cameras around the house to watch me, and that night, I saw myself leave the house and come back later with some cash. Cash I must have stolen. Yeah, I learned someone's house had been broken into the day after that. I finally put 2 and 2 together and went back to the website. I hadn't checked my wallet, but it had a substantial amount of Bitcoin now. Clearly, this thing hadn't been a hoax. They wouldn't be paying me if they weren't getting something out of it. Whatever entity chose to inhabit my body started out by just mimicking what I normally did, but it was clear it was getting more and more daring with the theft and vandalism it was doing. I read up that long contract again, and I saw a no termination clause. I can't exactly communicate with this thing that takes control of me, and even if I could, I have a feeling that it doesn't want to leave. Forum posts on that site are of no help as a few people seem to be in the same boat as me, but have no idea what to do. The site doesn't have a customer service section, to no surprise. Based on what I've read of the contract, the entity can't hurt me or my property or do a crime that would lead to me being arrested or the such. But it can do crime as long as it makes sure that I'm not caught later on. Anyway, I highly doubt it wants me to be arrested. It would not have as much fun as when I'm free to roam around. In the end, though, I realized that I couldn't live like this. There was nothing else to do but wait for my contract to expire, so I moved to a very remote area where there are few people around. I'm glad for that, so the thing can't harm anyone else. I've even had to give my dog away to my parents for the time being. I don't know if she'd count as my property, but I don't want that thing hurting her one day. I read on a forum post on that site of someone who found themselves with blood on their hands after a blackout, and that they were freaking out while wondering whose it was. It's obviously much worse for those who rented out their bodies for several hours. I guess I should be thankful I only agreed to 1 hour. I've quit my job, and I only go out to town to get supplies when the hour is up. I thought about maybe tying myself up so I can't get out, but I'd still need to do things like go to the bathroom, and that sounds like a terrible way to live. It's been 3 months total and there are 9 left. The coins I keep getting are enough to pay my living expenses, thankfully. I might have had to rent myself out for longer if that wasn't the case. I'm writing this because I was curious if there's a lawyer among you who might be willing to read over the contract I agreed to. If every contract has a loophole, I'd be happy if you could find one in this one. I can't go to a regular attorney, of course, given no one would believe me. I mean, where would I even go to dispute this? But if there's someone among you who is experienced with dealing with supernatural contracts, please do contact me. If possible, I would also prefer it if you could accept payments in Bitcoin.